I'm Megan Mitchell, 32, and my world shattered the day I learned my parents changed their will to leave everything to my brother. Years of trying to earn their approval gone, but nothing prepared me for what came next. As I stared at my phone in disbelief, my mother's text glared back. "It's over between us. I know what you did and I have proof." The family business worth millions would all go to Ryan. Then I realized something that changed everything. That message was never meant for me. Before I dive into this nightmare, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by the people who should love you the most. Trust me, what happens next will show you why standing your ground matters more than you think. I grew up in Brookline, an affluent suburb of Boston, in a 5-bedroom colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. My father, William, built Mitchell Electronics from a small repair shop into a regional powerhouse, and my mother, Barbara, was the consummate executive's wife. Charity galas, country club memberships, and neighborhood influence. My brother Ryan was 3 years older and from my earliest memories clearly the favorite. He had my father's strong jawline and my mother's charismatic smile, while I inherited my grandmother's auburn hair and quiet demeanor. When Ryan played baseball, my parents never missed a game. When I made the debate team and went to nationals, my mother attended but spent most of the time on phone calls. My father couldn't make it an important business meeting, he said. "Ryan's just like your father," my mother would say, as if that explained everything. "He needs extra support to channel all that Mitchell energy." That Mitchell energy translated to Ryan being kicked out of 2 prestigious private schools for cheating and fighting. When he finally graduated high school with barely passing grades, my parents threw him a lavish party. I graduated valedictorian 2 years later and got a modest dinner at our usual restaurant. "Megan doesn't need the fuss," my mother explained to relatives who questioned the disparity. "She's always been so self-sufficient." Self-sufficient wasn't a choice, it was survival. While Ryan got everything handed to him, I learned early that I'd have to earn my own way. I worked hard, got into Harvard on a partial scholarship, and graduated with honors. My parents attended graduation but left early because Ryan had a business opportunity they needed to discuss. That opportunity was his first failed restaurant venture that they funded to the tune of $200,000. While I worked to pay off my student loans and built a career in marketing, Ryan bounced between entrepreneurial disasters: a nightclub that closed after 6 months, an import business that never imported anything. Each time my parents covered his losses and encouraged him to keep trying. When I found the perfect condo in Boston and asked my parents for help with the down payment, the first time I'd ever asked for financial assistance, my father looked uncomfortable. "We're a bit tied up right now, sweetheart. We just invested in Ryan's new tech startup. But you're doing so well, I'm sure you can handle it on your own." I later discovered that "a bit tied up" meant they'd given Ryan $350,000 for a vague app idea that never made it past the planning stage. Every family gathering became a showcase of Ryan's newest venture, while my promotion to marketing director at a Fortune 500 company barely warranted a toast. When I won an industry award, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Ryan's meeting with investors next week?" The pattern continued for years. Ryan failing upward on my parents' dime, while I built my life brick by brick. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that I was proud of my independence. But deep down the inequality stung. I accidentally discovered the full extent of their financial support for Ryan when I helped my mother organize her home office during a visit. A folder labeled Ryan's expenses contained documentation of payments totaling over $1.2 million. Over the past decade, college tuition they'd promised but never delivered for me. Business investments, luxury car leases, rent for high-end apartments, even his divorce settlement from his first wife. When I confronted her, she quickly snatched the folder. "Your brother has different needs," she said defensively. "He's a visionary like your father, and visionaries need backing." "And what am I?" I asked, fighting back tears. She patted my hand condescendingly. "You're practical, Megan. You've always known how to take care of yourself." I drove back to Boston that night wondering if my parents had any idea how deeply their favoritism had cut me. Or worse, if they knew and simply didn't care. Last Thanksgiving was supposed to be like any other family holiday, strained pleasantries, masking unresolved tensions, excessive alcohol to dull the pain of being overlooked, and Ryan dominating the conversation with tales of his latest sure thing business venture. This time it was a cryptocurrency platform guaranteed to revolutionize digital finance. I arrived early to help my mother in the kitchen, a peace offering of sorts after our confrontation about Ryan's expenses. The house smelled of roasting turkey and my mother's signature sage stuffing, but the warm aromas couldn't dispel the chill between us. "Your father's in his study with Ryan," she said without looking up from the cranberry sauce she was stirring. "Something about investment strategies." I nodded and busied myself with the table settings, arranging the heirloom china and crystal glasses with precision. After an hour, I needed to use the bathroom near my father's study. As I approached, raised voices carried through the partially open door. "It's the right decision, William," my mother was saying. "Megan has her career. She doesn't need the business or the house." "But everything, Barbara. Don't you think we should leave her something?" My father's voice sounded uncertain, a rarity for the decisive businessman. "Ryan has vision," my mother insisted. "He'll take Mitchell Electronics to new heights with the right resources. Megan would just sell her shares or bring in outside management." "The new will is fair," Ryan's voice chimed in. "Megan's never shown any interest in the family business anyway. She's too busy with her corporate ladder climbing." I stood frozen, the blood draining from my face. They were changing their will to cut me out entirely. The family business, the house, everything would go to Ryan, my chronically failing, constantly bailed out brother. Before I could move, the door swung open fully. My father's expression shifted from surprise to guilt to a cold mask of authority. Behind him, my mother looked uncomfortable, but Ryan smirked slightly before composing his features into fake concern. "Megan," my father said flatly, "how long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "You're cutting me out of the will." My father straightened, slipping into his boardroom persona. "We're making adjustments that make sense for the family and the business." "What about my family? What about my contribution?" My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "Sweetheart," my mother intervened with her society smile, "you have your wonderful career. Ryan needs the security of the family assets to build on your father's legacy." "Security?" I laughed incredulously. "He's burned through over $1 million with nothing to show for it." "That's startup capital," Ryan cut in smoothly. "All entrepreneurs have failures before success. Dad understands that." My father nodded. "Ryan needs it more than you do, Megan. You've always been the independent one." The words hit like physical blows. My independence, born of necessity because they'd given everything to Ryan, was now being used as justification to disinherit me. "This isn't about need," I said, fighting to keep my voice from breaking. "This is about fairness. About recognizing that I'm your child too." "Don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "Of course you're our child. But the business needs a Mitchell at the helm, someone with your father's vision." "Someone Mala, you mean?" I shot back. My father's face hardened. "This isn't about gender. It's about who's committed to Mitchell Electronics. You chose your path, Megan. Corporate marketing at Westfield Industries, instead of joining the family business. You never asked me to join. You pushed me away while handing Ryan everything." The turkey timer chimed distantly from the kitchen, a surreal interruption to the family implosion happening in the study. "I need to check that," my mother murmured, slipping past me without meeting my eyes. My father sighed heavily. "We can discuss this another time. Today is Thanksgiving." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, gathering my purse from the hallway table. "You've made your decision. I won't pretend to be thankful for scraps from Ryan's table." As I walked toward the front door, Ryan followed me. "Don't make a scene, Meg," he said in a low voice. Just accept it. The will is signed, and if you challenge it, things will get ugly. I'll make sure of it." His threat hung in the air between us. The mask of brotherly concern dropped to reveal the calculating manipulator beneath. "I've never asked for handouts like you," I replied, hand on the doorknob. "But I won't be erased from this family without a fight." I left without another word, tears finally breaking free, as I drove away from the house that would never be my inheritance. The text came 3 hours later while I was nursing a glass of wine alone in my condo. "We missed you at dinner. Your plate is in the refrigerator if you want to come by tomorrow. Love, Mom." As if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just told me I was worth nothing to them compared to my brother. 1 week after the Thanksgiving disaster, I was buried in work trying to lose myself in marketing campaigns and analytics reports rather than dwelling on my family's betrayal. I hadn't responded to any of their messages, my father's terse "we should talk" text, my mother's increasingly concerned voicemails, or Ryan's smug "don't be a sore loser" email. I was reviewing a presentation when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. What I read made me nearly drop the device. "It's over between us. I know what you did and I have proof. I'm telling William everything." I stared at the message, reading it over and over. It made no sense directed at me. We weren't on good terms, but nothing had happened between us that warranted such a dramatic declaration. Then it hit me, this wasn't meant for me at all. My mother had sent it to the wrong person. But who was the intended recipient, and what had they done that my mother had proof of? I tried calling her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I texted back, "Mom, I think you sent this to the wrong person," but received no response. That night I couldn't sleep, turning the mysterious text over in my mind. What could it mean? Who was she planning to confront? My father, Ryan, someone else entirely? The next morning I remembered that my mother had visited my condo the previous month to drop off some winter clothes she'd found in my old closet. She'd asked to use my iPad to check her email while I made us coffee. Could she have forgotten to log out? I grabbed my iPad and there it was, her Gmail account still signed in. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the icon. Invading her privacy felt wrong, but after being blindsided by the will revelation, I needed answers. The most recent emails were mundane charity committee correspondence, book club schedules, but something in the search bar caught my eye. It had saved her last search evidence of affair text messages. My stomach dropped. I entered the same search terms and dozens of results appeared, emails my mother had sent to herself with screenshots of text messages between my father and a woman named Jessica. With growing horror, I realized Jessica was Ryan's wife of 3 years. The messages were explicit and left no doubt that my father and Jessica had been having an affair for at least a year. But even more shocking were the emails between my mother and Ryan about the situation. I've attached the bank statements showing the transfers to Jessica's private account. One email from Ryan read, "Dad's been funneling company money to her for months. This is beyond an affair, Mom. He's stealing from the company to keep her happy." My mother's reply was equally disturbing. "I can't believe he'd betray us like this. First the affair and now embezzlement. We need to protect the company, Ryan. I'll talk to our lawyer about changing the will immediately. You need to have full control before he gambles everything away on that woman." I felt sick. Not only was my father having an affair with my brother's wife, but Ryan was using the situation to manipulate my mother into giving him complete control of the family assets. But something wasn't adding up. In one email, Ryan mentioned having discovered the affair 6 months ago, yet he and Jessica still presented themselves as the perfect couple at family functions. Why would he stay with a wife who was cheating on him with his father? I dug deeper into the email exchanges and found my answer in an email from 3 months ago. Ryan had written, "Jessica doesn't know I know about her and Dad. I'm gathering evidence before I confront them. In the meantime, I've convinced Dad that I have a promising investment opportunity. He's already transferred $200,000 to get it started. Don't worry, the money is safe in my offshore account." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Ryan wasn't a betrayed husband. He was blackmailing our father and manipulating our mother. He'd discovered the affair, and instead of confronting them, he'd used it as leverage to extract money from our father, while simultaneously convincing our mother to change the will in his favor. And now, based on that text, it seemed my mother had discovered something that changed everything. Had she found out about Ryan's blackmail scheme? Was that why she'd written, "It's over between us," and threatened to tell my father everything? I needed to talk to her immediately to show her what I'd found and warn her about Ryan's manipulation. I gathered the most damning emails, forwarded them to my personal account, and headed to my car. It was time to confront my mother with the truth, no matter how painful. I suggested meeting my mother at Serafina's, a quiet cafe far from our usual haunts where we'd be unlikely to run into family friends. When she arrived, her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy behind oversized sunglasses. She'd aged years in the week since Thanksgiving. "I got your text by mistake," I said after we'd ordered coffee. "Mom, what's going on?" She removed her sunglasses, hands shaking slightly. "It was nothing, just a misunderstanding with a charity committee member." "Don't lie to me," I said firmly, sliding my iPad across the table. "I know about Dad and Jessica." Her face crumpled. "How did you stayed logged into your email on my iPad." "Mom, I know everything, the affair, Ryan's blackmail, all of it." She reached for her water with trembling fingers. "You don't understand the situation, Megan." "Then help me understand why you're cutting me out of the will while Ryan manipulates and blackmails his way into the entire inheritance." Her eyes darted around the cafe. "Lower your voice," she hissed. "This is a private family matter." "A family that apparently doesn't include me," I countered. "Who was that text meant for, Dad or Ryan?" She stared into her untouched coffee. "William," she finally admitted. "I found out he's been taking money from the company, significant amounts. At first I thought it was all for Jessica, but then I discovered transfers to offshore accounts in Ryan's name. So Ryan's been blackmailing Dad about the affair." She nodded miserably. "I confronted your father yesterday. He admitted everything. Ryan discovered the affair months ago and threatened to expose it unless your father invested in his new ventures. And Dad agreed to pay him off instead of coming clean. Your father built his reputation on family values and ethical business practices. The scandal would destroy everything he's worked for." She took a shuddering breath. "But that's not all. When I checked the company financial records, I found evidence that Ryan has been embezzling for years long before he knew about the affair. Small amounts at first, then larger sums disguised as vendor payments." I sat back stunned. "So Ryan's been stealing from the family business, then used the affair to blackmail Dad into giving him even more money, all while convincing you to change the will in his favor. And neither of you thought to question any of this." My mother's eyes welled with tears. "We've always made excuses for him. Your father saw himself in Ryan, the bold risk-taker. We believed in his potential despite the setbacks." "Those weren't setbacks, Mom. They were failures, one after another, while you handed him millions and told me I was on my own because I was independent." She reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. "Megan, I'm so sorry. We've been blind when it comes to Ryan. But now I see clearly, and I'm going to fix this. I've told your father everything I've discovered about Ryan's embezzlement. We're meeting with the lawyers tomorrow to revise the will again and discuss what to do about the missing funds. Does Ryan know you've figured him out?" "No, and I'd like to keep it that way until we've secured the company assets. I need you to promise me you won't confront him yet." I studied my mother's face, the familiar features now twisted with worry and shame. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and she was finally seeing the truth about my brother. "I promise," I said, "but I want to be at that meeting with the lawyers tomorrow." She nodded, squeezing my hand gratefully. "Thank you, Megan. I know we have a lot to make up for with you. This is a start." We spent another hour going through the evidence I'd found and her own discoveries about Ryan's financial manipulation. When we parted, she hugged me tightly. "Not a word to Ryan until after tomorrow's meeting," she reminded me. He can be unpredictable when cornered. I promised again and headed home feeling cautiously optimistic that the family dynamic might finally be shifting. My phone rang just as I was unlocking my condo door. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, brother." "You conniving little bitch," he snarled without preamble. "I just had a very interesting call with Mom. Seems you two had quite the heart-to-heart today." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. She told me everything, how you hacked her email, how you're trying to convince her I'm stealing from the company, how you're desperate to get your hands on the inheritance." "She promised," I started, then stopped myself. Ryan laughed coldly. "She promised not to tell me." Well, big surprise, she lied. She called me the minute she left the cafe. "We've already spoken to Dad together. They know what you're trying to do, and they're not falling for it." "You're lying," I said, but uncertainty crept into my voice. "Am I check your email? Mom just sent a family update." I put him on speaker and opened my email. There, it was a message from my mother sent 30 minutes ago. "Ryan, William and Megan, after much reflection, William and I have decided to proceed with our original estate plan as discussed at Thanksgiving. Megan, I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but your accusations against your brother are unfounded and hurtful. Ryan has provided documentation clearing up the financial discrepancies, and we consider this matter closed. We love you both equally, but decisions about the family business must be based on commitment and loyalty." "Mom," you see Ryan's voice dripped with satisfaction. "You tried to turn them against me and it backfired spectacularly. Face it, Megan, they'll always choose me." "What did you do to convince them?" I demanded. "What new lie did you tell?" "I didn't have to lie. I just reminded them who stood by the family business all these years and who ran away to corporate America. Now be a good girl and stay out of things that don't concern you." The call ended, leaving me staring at my mother's email in shock and betrayal. She had promised to keep our conversation private, had seemed so genuine in her regret and determination to right the family's wrongs. Yet within hours she had not only broken her promise but completely reversed her position. I sank onto my couch, the familiar feeling of betrayal washing over me. But this time, instead of hurt, I felt something new rising within me, cold, clear anger and a determination to expose the truth no matter the cost. The morning after Ryan's gloating call, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. If my parents wouldn't see the truth about their precious son, I would gather evidence so compelling they couldn't ignore it. I called Sarah Jensen, my college roommate, who had become a forensic accountant, and invited her to lunch. Over salads at a downtown bistro, I explained the situation without family names or specifics. "Let me get this straight," Sarah said, tucking her blonde hair behind her ear. "You need to prove your brother has been embezzling from the family business, but you don't have access to the financial records." "Not officially," I admitted. "But I do have my father's password for the company's cloud storage. He's used the same one for everything since I was in high school. I've never used it before, but..." Sarah set down her fork. "Megan, what you're suggesting borders on illegal. So does stealing $500,000 from a family business," I countered. "I'm not asking you to do anything unethical. Just help me understand what I find. You're the expert at following money trails." She sighed, then nodded slowly. "Send me what you can get. I'll tell you what I see, but I won't testify or put my name on anything. This stays between us." That night, I logged into Mitchell Electronics cloud storage, using my father's predictable password, myfirstboat1985. I downloaded 3 years of financial records, accounts payable reports, and banking statements, then forwarded them to Sarah. Her response came 2 days later: "Call me as soon as possible. Found something." We met at her apartment where she had spreadsheets and flowcharts covering her dining table. "Your brother is either very sloppy or very arrogant," she said, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. "He's been siphoning money through fake vendor accounts for at least 4 years. The pattern is obvious once you know what to look for." She showed me how Ryan had created shell companies that billed Mitchell Electronics for consulting services never rendered. The invoices were all approved by my father or Ryan himself, and the payments went to LLCs that ultimately traced back to my brother's personal accounts. The total is just over $480,000, Sarah concluded. And that doesn't count the loans and investments that were properly documented but never repaid. Add those, and we're looking at close to $800,000. I took photos of the most damning evidence and thanked Sarah profusely. "What will you do with this?" she asked as I gathered my things. "Take it to my father. He needs to see what his golden boy has been doing to the company he built." I called my father's assistant and scheduled an appointment for the next day, presenting myself as a potential client. When I walked into his corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, his surprise quickly turned to wariness. "Megan, Caroline didn't mention it was you. Would you have seen me if she had?" I challenged, setting my portfolio on his desk. He sighed heavily. "Your mother told me about your accusations against Ryan. I thought we settled this." "You settled nothing. You chose to believe Ryan's lies because they're more comfortable than the truth." I opened the portfolio and spread out Sarah's findings. "This is the truth, Dad. Documented verified evidence that Ryan has stolen nearly $500,000 from Mitchell Electronics." My father's face remained impassive as he scanned the documents, but I saw his hand tighten on his pen. "Where did you get these records?" he asked quietly. "Does it matter? Look at the evidence. Ryan created fake vendors to bill the company for services never provided. He's been doing it for years, right under your nose." My father studied the flowcharts, his expression hardening. "I'm aware of some financial irregularities." I stared at him in disbelief. You knew he was stealing and you did nothing." He set the papers down carefully. "It's not that simple, Megan. Ryan has had some cash flow issues with his investments. He always intended to pay it back once his ventures turned profitable." "Cash flow issues? That's what you call systematic theft?" "Dad, he's been stealing from the company for years. He's not using it for investments. He has offshore accounts." My father's jaw tightened. "That's enough. What happens within the company is not your concern. It is when you're using the company as an excuse to disinherit me. You're giving everything to a thief while telling me I don't deserve anything because I chose a career outside the family business." "Ryan is family," my father said firmly. "We handle family matters privately." "And I'm not family," I demanded, my voice breaking despite my resolve to stay calm. He looked uncomfortable. "Of course you are. But you've never shown interest in Mitchell Electronics. You've built your own life, your own career. Because you never gave me the chance. You handed everything to Ryan while telling me to fend for myself." My father stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'll look into these allegations properly. In the meantime, I expect your discretion. No more discussions with your mother about this." "You're still protecting him," I said incredulously. "Even with proof in your hands, you're choosing him." "I'm protecting the family and the business he corrected. Something you might understand if you'd ever shown any loyalty to either." I gathered the documents with shaking hands. "I'm giving you one chance to do the right thing. Handle this properly, or I'll take these findings to the board of directors." His expression darkened. "Don't threaten me, Megan. You won't like the consequences." I left his office feeling hollow. My father had all but admitted he knew about Ryan's theft but was still protecting him, still choosing him over me, and over the integrity of the business he'd built. That weekend, my mother insisted on a family dinner to clear the air. Against my better judgment, I agreed to attend. The tension in the dining room was thick enough to cut with the sterling silver knives laid out on my mother's finest tablecloth. My father was quieter than usual, watching Ryan with an unreadable expression. My mother fluttered around, filling silences with meaningless chatter about neighbors and community events. Ryan, however, seemed completely at ease, describing his latest cryptocurrency venture with animated confidence. The initial coin offering projects a first-year return of 30%, he explained, helping himself to more roast beef. Dad's already committed as our anchor investor, haven't you, Dad? My father nodded absently. I set down my fork with a deliberate clink. Really, Dad? Another investment after everything we discussed? My mother shot me a warning look. Megan, we agreed not to discuss business matters tonight. No, you decided that I corrected. I came here expecting accountability, not another show of Ryan's smoke and mirrors. Ryan smiled condescendingly. Still bitter about the will, sis? I thought you were above such petty concerns with your big corporate career. I turned to my father. Did you look into those financial discrepancies we discussed? My father cleared his throat. I reviewed the documents you provided. And I pressed. And the matter is being handled internally, he stated firmly. As I told you it would be. I looked around the table, my father's averted gaze, my mother's nervous smile, Ryan's smug expression, and realized nothing had changed. Despite the irrefutable evidence, they were proceeding as if Ryan's theft was a minor indiscretion, rather than a serious crime. So, that's it, I asked. Ryan steals from the company for years, and it's handled internally. No consequences, no changes to your precious will. That's enough, my father said sharply. This dinner was your mother's attempt to bring peace to the family. If you can't respect that, perhaps you should leave. I stood slowly. You know what I think I should. Enjoy your dinner with your real family. As I walked to the door, Ryan followed me into the foyer. You tried, you failed, game over, he murmured low enough that our parents couldn't hear from the dining room. Next time you go digging into company finances, remember who has access to everything you do on the network. Dad's password hasn't changed in 10 years, Megan. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I felt a chill at the realization he'd known about my investigation all along. You won't get away with this forever, I told him. Sooner or later they'll see you for who you really are. He smirked. They see exactly what they want to see, the son who stayed, who's dedicated to the family legacy, not the daughter who couldn't wait to escape. I left without another word, the sound of my parents resuming their dinner conversation following me out the door. In my car, I finally let the tears of frustration fall. I had presented clear evidence of Ryan's crimes. And still my parents chose to believe his lies. Still, they chose him. 3 days after the disastrous family dinner, I received a text from an unknown number. We need to talk about Ryan. Coffee at Thinking Cup on Newbury. St. 2 p.m. today. Jessica. My sister-in-law was the last person I expected to hear from. In the 3 years since she'd married Ryan, we'd maintained a polite but distant relationship. She fit perfectly into my brother's carefully crafted image, beautiful, socially connected, and always impeccably dressed in designer labels that I strongly suspected my parents paid for. Curiosity won out over caution. I arrived at the cafe precisely at 2, spotting Jessica in a corner booth wearing large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. As I approached, she removed them, revealing a fading bruise around her left eye, poorly concealed with makeup. What happened? I asked, sliding into the seat opposite her. Ryan happened, she replied, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. He found out I was going to leave him. I stared at her in shock. Did you report him? She laughed bitterly. To who? Your father? The police. Ryan has everyone wrapped around his finger. Besides, this was the first time he's gotten physical. Usually his control is more subtle. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. No one does. Ryan is very careful about his public image. She leaned forward. But that's not why I asked you here. I know you've been investigating him. I want to help. I studied her warily. Why would you help me against your husband? And what about your affair with my father? Her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. Affair with William? Is that what Ryan told you? I saw the text messages, I countered. Between you and my father. Jessica shook her head slowly. Those messages weren't between me and your father. They were between Ryan and your father's assistant Caroline. Ryan used my phone to send them, then screenshotted them to make it look like your father was having an affair with me. But why would he? Control, she interrupted. Ryan needed leverage over your father to keep the money flowing. He created a fake affair, then used it to blackmail William. My mind raced to process this new information. But my mother saw those messages. She believed the affair was real. That was the point. Ryan showed Barbara the fake evidence, knowing she'd confront William. Your father denied it, of course, but the seed of doubt was planted. Then Ryan stepped in as the dutiful son, offering to help manage the company while your parents worked through their issues. And my father went along with this charade. Jessica sipped her coffee. William was confused at first, but then Ryan suggested Caroline might have developed inappropriate feelings for him. Your father didn't want to fire a loyal employee over a misunderstanding, so he let Ryan handle it, which meant paying Caroline a large severance to leave quietly, money that actually went straight to Ryan. I sat back, stunned by the extent of my brother's manipulation. How do you know all this? I found Ryan's notes. He actually keeps a journal of his schemes. He calls it his strategy log. That's how I discovered he's been embezzling from Mitchell Electronics for years. When I confronted him, She gestured to her bruised eye. Why are you telling me this now? Why not go directly to my parents? I tried, Jessica said, frustration evident in her voice. Your mother refused to believe me. She thinks I'm trying to cause trouble because Ryan and I have been fighting. And your father, I think he suspects the truth, but can't bring himself to admit how badly he's been manipulated. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a flash drive. Everything's here: copies of Ryan's journal entries, the original messages he faked between your father and Caroline, bank statements showing transfers to his offshore accounts. There's even a recording. Recording of what? Ryan bragging to his friend Scott about how he's played your family for fools, how he's guaranteed himself the entire Mitchell fortune while making sure you get nothing. I took the flash drive, turning it over in my palm. This is enough to destroy him. It's enough to make your parents see the truth, she corrected. That's what you really want, isn't it? Not to destroy Ryan, but to be acknowledged as their daughter, to be treated equally. Her insight caught me off guard. Despite everything, she was right. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted my parents to see me. What happens to you after this? I asked. If I use this evidence, Jessica straightened her shoulders. I'm filing for divorce either way. I've already found an apartment and transferred what money I could to a private account. I just need to get through the next few weeks until everything's finalized. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you for this. And I'm truly sorry about. I gestured to her eye. Just make it count, she replied, rising to leave. Make them see. I spent that night reviewing everything on the flash drive. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Ryan hadn't just been stealing from the company. He'd been systematically manipulating our entire family through an intricate web of lies and fabricated evidence. The most disturbing item was the audio recording Ryan laughing with his friend about how easy it had been to turn our parents against me. Megan's always been the good girl, the achiever, my brother's voice said mockingly. She thought that would make them love her, but all it did was make her dispensable. They don't need her. They need me, the screw-up they have to save. And now you get everything, his friend asked. Every last penny, Ryan confirmed. The business, the house, the investment accounts. Meanwhile, Miss Harvard MBA gets nothing but a pat on the back for being so independent. Their laughter made my stomach turn. I had never wanted to believe my brother actually hated me, but the malice in his voice was unmistakable. Armed with Jessica's evidence, I arranged to meet my parents at their home the following evening. When I arrived, I was shocked to find Ryan already there, sitting comfortably in my father's study as if he'd been invited. Family meeting, right? He said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm family. My mother looked uncomfortable. Ryan stopped by to discuss some business matters with your father. When I mentioned you were coming over, you told him I was coming. I interrupted the betrayal fresh once more. We shouldn't have secrets in this family, my mother said defensively. I laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from the woman who's been enabling a thief and a liar for decades. Watch your mouth, my father warned from behind his desk. I pulled out my laptop and the flash drive. No, Dad. It's time you both watched and listened. For the next hour, I presented Jessica's evidence methodically, the journal entries detailing Ryan's embezzlement schemes, the faked text messages he'd created to manufacture the affair between our father and Caroline Bank, statements showing the money trail to his offshore accounts, and finally, the damning audio recording of Ryan bragging about manipulating our parents. My mother's face grew increasingly pale as the evidence mounted. My father remained stone-faced, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, a sure sign he was struggling to maintain control. Ryan surprisingly remained calm throughout my presentation. When I finally finished, he slow clapped. Impressive detective work, sis. Did Jessica help you put together this little fiction, my mentally unstable, vindictive wife who's angry because I won't give her the divorce settlement she's demanding? These are your own words, Ryan, I said, rewinding the audio to play his voice again. Your own journal entries. Your own bank transfers. He shrugged. Easily fabricated. Jessica has always been jealous of my family connections. Now that we're divorcing, she's trying to turn you all against me. My mother looked uncertainly between us. Jessica did seem very upset when she came to see me last week. She made some wild accusations. I stared at her in disbelief. After everything I've just shown you, you're still defending him. What would it take for you to believe the truth about your precious son? Before she could answer, my father spoke, his voice unnaturally calm. Ryan, is any of this true? Have you been stealing from the company? Ryan adopted a regretful expression. Dad, I admit I've borrowed from the business when my investments faced temporary setbacks. I always intended to pay everything back once my ventures succeeded. But this conspiracy theory about faking an affair, manipulating you and Mom, that's absurd. Then explain the recording, I demanded. That's your voice bragging about how you've played this family. A private joke taken out of context, Ryan dismissed. Scott and I were discussing a screenplay idea. My mother seized on this explanation like a lifeline. You see, Megan, there's a reasonable explanation. There's nothing reasonable about this, I exclaimed. You're choosing to believe obvious lies because the truth is too painful to accept. My father rubbed his temples. Enough. I think we all need time to process this information. Ryan, we'll discuss the company funds tomorrow at the office. That's it? I asked incredulously. Ryan admits to borrowing company money without permission, which is the definition of theft, by the way, and you're going to discuss it tomorrow. What would you have me do, Megan? My father snapped. Call the police on my own son. Destroy the family name with a public scandal. I'd have you acknowledge the truth. I'd have you hold him accountable for once in his life. My mother stood abruptly. I think you should leave, Megan. You're upset and this conversation isn't productive. I looked between them. My father's closed expression, my mother's averted eyes, Ryan's barely concealed smirk, and knew I had lost again. Despite the mountain of evidence, they were still choosing to believe what they wanted to believe. As I gathered my laptop, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. They know I gave you the evidence. Ryan found my backup files. Not safe at apartment. Where can I go? I felt a chill. I looked at Ryan, who smiled innocently, and realized Jessica might be in real danger. I'm leaving, I announced, but this isn't over. One day you'll be forced to see the truth, and I hope it's not too late when you do. I hurried out to my car and called Jessica, directing her to meet me at a hotel downtown, where I would book her a room under my name. As I drove, I realized the family alliances had shifted irrevocably. My parents might still be in denial, but I now had one unexpected ally in this fight, my brother's wife. And together we had the truth on our side. What I didn't realize yet was that truth alone wouldn't be enough to break through decades of willful blindness. The real battle was just beginning, and it would get much worse before it got better. The morning after my failed attempt to convince my parents, I met with Stephanie Carson, a corporate lawyer who specialized in family business disputes. Her corner office overlooked Boston Public Garden, but I barely noticed the view as I laid out the evidence Jessica had provided. "This is quite compelling," Stephanie said, reviewing the documents spread across her conference table. "The embezzlement alone would be grounds for criminal charges. The manipulation and blackmail add another layer of complexity." "I don't necessarily want my brother in jail," I admitted. "I just want my parents to see the truth, and to be treated fairly in the inheritance." Stephanie leaned back, studying me. "Let me be direct, Megan. Family business disputes are messy, expensive, and emotionally devastating. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the years of favoritism, the recent betrayals, and the flash drive full of evidence showing just how callously Ryan had manipulated everyone. "I'm already devastated," I said quietly. "But I can't walk away and let him steal everything my parents built while continuing to manipulate them." "Then we need a strategy," she said briskly. "Going directly to your parents hasn't worked. Your brother has too much influence over them. We need to approach this from another angle." She outlined a plan. Rather than confronting my family directly, we would present evidence of financial irregularities to the board of directors of Mitchell Electronics. My father was CEO and majority shareholder, but the company had a 5-person board that included 3 outside members. "The board has a fiduciary duty to investigate financial improprieties," Stephanie explained. "They can't simply dismiss evidence of embezzlement, no matter who's involved." "Won't this create exactly the public scandal my father fears?" "Not necessarily. Boards handle sensitive matters confidentially all the time. But the threat of potential publicity might be enough to make your father take this seriously." Sometimes the only way to protect a family's reputation is to handle these matters properly before they explode into something uncontainable. I agreed to her approach, though my stomach knotted at the thought of the confrontation to come. Stephanie prepared a carefully worded letter to the board attaching the most irrefutable evidence of Ryan's embezzlement, without including the personal family manipulation. She sent it anonymously from her office, ensuring it couldn't be traced back to me immediately. The response was swift. Within 48 hours, the board called an emergency meeting. My father as CEO was required to attend, but I learned through Stephanie's sources that he had been blindsided by the allegations presented to the board. The day after the board meeting, Jessica called me in a panic. "Ryan's destroying documents," she said, her voice hushed. "He came home with boxes of files and has been shredding everything. He's frantic, keeps saying someone's trying to frame him." "The board must have confronted Dad with the evidence," I said. "Did you manage to get anything before he destroyed it all?" "I took photos of some documents while he was in the shower. I'm sending them to you now." The photos showed financial statements with handwritten notes in the margins, calculations of how much money could be siphoned without raising red flags, account numbers for offshore transfers, and most damning of all, a list titled "Contingency Plan" that included options like blame accounting department, claim identity theft, and worst case liquidate assets and leave country. I forwarded the images to Stephanie, who immediately sent them to the board with a note that the accused was destroying evidence. That afternoon I received a terse text from my father: "We need to talk now." I met him at his club, a wood-paneled establishment in downtown Boston, where generations of Mitchell men had conducted business. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and new lines etched around his mouth. "The board has frozen all executive financial privileges pending an investigation," he said without preamble. "For the first time in 30 years, I can't authorize a simple purchase order without 3 signatures. "I'm sorry it's come to this," I said, genuinely regretful despite everything. His eyes narrowed. "Are you? The anonymous whistleblower's evidence looks remarkably similar to what you presented to your mother and me. Perhaps because it's the same truth, just presented to people willing to take it seriously." He slammed his hand on the table, causing nearby patrons to glance our way. Do you have any idea what you've done? The board is talking about a forensic audit. If this becomes public, the company's reputation is already at risk because of Ryan's actions, I interrupted firmly. Not because someone exposed them. My father deflated, slightly rubbing his forehead. The board has scheduled interviews with the entire accounting department. They've hired an outside firm to investigate. This is a nightmare. It doesn't have to be. You could cooperate, fully hold Ryan accountable, and implement proper financial controls. Save the company and your legacy. And what about your brother? Do you expect me to throw my son to the wolves? I leaned forward intently. I expect you to be the father who taught me about integrity and accountability when I was little. The one who said actions have consequences no matter who you are. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps of the values he'd once espoused before favoritism and willful blindness had eroded them. I need time to think, he said finally, to figure out how to handle this. Don't let Ryan manipulate you again, I warned. He's already destroying evidence. What else will he do to cover his tracks? I left my father contemplating his scotch, hoping I'd reach some part of him that remembered the principled businessman he'd once been. That hope was short-lived. 3 hours later, I received an urgent call from Jessica. Your father's in the hospital, she said, her voice shaking. He collapsed at home with chest pains. They think it's a heart attack. I rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital, arriving to find my mother in the waiting room, her face streaked with tears. When she saw me, her expression hardened. Are you satisfied now? She demanded. Your father is fighting for his life because of your vindictive campaign against your brother. That's not fair, I protested. Dad's stress is because of Ryan's actions, not because they were exposed. Ryan has been by his side for years while you've been focused on your career. Now when your father needed peace, you created this crisis with your accusations. They're not accusations, Mom. They're facts. Facts that the board is now investigating because they take their responsibilities seriously. She turned away from me. Just go, Megan. You've done enough damage. Ryan arrived moments later, his face a perfect mask of concerned son. When he saw me, his eyes flashed with malice before quickly resuming his worried expression. The doctor says it was a mild heart attack, he announced. They've stabilized him, but he'll need to stay for observation and tests. My mother clutched his arm. Thank God you're here. Of course I am, he said soothingly. I'll handle everything. The business, the board inquiry, all of it. Dad just needs to focus on recovering. He turned to me with a cold smile. You should leave, Megan. Stress isn't good for cardiac patients. I stood my ground. I'm staying until I know Dad's okay. Suit yourself, he shrugged, leading our mother toward the doctor who had appeared in the doorway. I remained in the waiting room texting updates to Jessica and Stephanie. Around midnight, a nurse informed me that my father was stable and resting comfortably. Only then did I leave exhausted and heartsick. The next morning I awoke to a barrage of text notifications. The first was from Jessica. Ryan came home last night with a document. Claims your father signed everything over to him. The second was from Stephanie, emergency call from board member. Ryan Mitchell presented document transferring controlling interest to him while William recovers. Board requesting verification. The third was from my mother. Your father has signed management control to Ryan during his recovery. The board investigation is on hold. Please respect this decision and your father's health. I called Stephanie immediately. He can't do this. My father was on medication under duress. I've already raised those concerns, she assured me. The board is hesitant to accept the document without verification from an independent physician that your father was competent to sign. Ryan must have pressured him while he was vulnerable, I said, pacing my apartment. This is a new low, even for him. There's something else, Stephanie said carefully. One of my contacts at the hospital mentioned your father had a private visitor late last night after regular visiting hours ended. Ryan, I said immediately. Security cameras would show who entered his room and when. If Ryan visited outside authorized hours and emerged with a signed document, I understood her implication. That would suggest undue influence at best, forgery at worst. While Stephanie pursued the security footage through legal channels, I drove to the hospital. My father was awake but groggy when I entered his room. "The nurse said you were asking for me," I said, surprised by the summons after yesterday's hostility. He gestured weakly to the chair beside his bed. "Did I sign something last night?" Ryan said it was just routine paperwork to keep the business running while I recover. My heart sank. "Dad, he told the board you transferred controlling interest to him, that you're stepping back entirely." Confusion clouded his face. "That's not what he said it was." "Did you read what you signed?" He looked away embarrassed. "My reading glasses were in Barbara's purse." Ryan summarized it. "He lied to you, Dad." Again. My father closed his eyes briefly. "I want to see the document." "I'll get a copy from Stephanie." I promised, texting my lawyer the request. When he opened his eyes again, they held a clarity I hadn't seen in years. "The board contacted me this morning about validating my signature. About my competency when I signed." "They're doing their job," I said gently. He nodded slowly. Yes, they are." He took a labored breath. "I built that company on integrity, Megan. Whatever's happening, whatever Ryan's done, I need to know the truth." For the first time in months I felt a flicker of hope. "I'll help you find it, Dad. All of it." As I left his room, I nearly collided with Ryan in the hallway. His surprise quickly morphed into suspicion. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting our father," I replied evenly. "He had some questions about a document you had him sign last night." Ryan's expression hardened. "Always meddling, aren't you, Dad?" Signed control over to me willingly. The doctors can confirm he was lucid. The doctors weren't present for the signing, were they? But the security cameras were. I wonder what they captured. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face before his arrogant mask slipped back into place. "You're pathetic, Megan. Still desperately seeking Daddy's approval while trying to tear me down." "This isn't about approval anymore," I said calmly. "This is about justice. For the company, for our parents, and yes, for me too." "You'll lose," he hissed. "You always do. They'll always choose me." I smiled, feeling strangely calm in the face of his anger. "We'll see about that." As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Got the security footage." Ryan entered room at 11:42 p.m. with folder left at 11:57 p.m. with document. "Hospital staff confirms your father received pain medication at 11:15 p.m. Presenting to board now." The legal battle had begun in earnest, and for the first time I believed we might actually win. 3 days after my confrontation with Ryan at the hospital, the board of Mitchell Electronics called an emergency meeting at the company headquarters. My father had been discharged but was ordered to rest at home so the meeting would proceed without him. Ryan confidently expected to be confirmed as acting CEO based on the document our father had signed. Instead, he walked into an ambush. Stephanie and I had worked tirelessly to prepare a comprehensive presentation for the board. We had the security footage showing Ryan entering our father's hospital room late at night, medical records confirming our father was under the influence of pain medication, and a statement from his doctor that he would not have been considered competent to make significant business decisions in that condition. Additionally, we had compiled all the evidence of Ryan's embezzlement, including Jessica's photographs of the documents he had attempted to destroy, and a devastating timeline of his financial manipulations over the years. When Ryan arrived at the boardroom, he found not only the 5 board members but also me, Stephanie, 2 forensic accountants, and most surprising of all, our mother. "What is she doing here?" he demanded, pointing at me. "This is a family business matter." "I am family," I replied calmly, "and the board invited me to present evidence relevant to your appointment." Frederick Wagner, the lead independent director, gestured for Ryan to take a seat. "Mr. Mitchell, serious concerns have been raised about both the validity of your appointment and certain financial irregularities. We're here to address these matters before proceeding." Ryan shot me a venomous look before composing his features into a mask of wounded innocence. My father willingly signed control over to me during his recovery. Any suggestion otherwise is a desperate attempt by my sister to undermine me, because she's been excluded from the business. That's not why we're concerned, Frederick replied, nodding to the company's legal counsel who distributed copies of the hospital security footage stills, along with the medical records. These records indicate your father was heavily medicated when you had him sign these documents, Frederick continued. His doctor has provided a written statement that he would not have been considered competent to make binding business decisions in that condition. Ryan waved dismissively. Dad was perfectly lucid. He knew exactly what he was signing. Then why did you tell him it was routine paperwork? I challenged. Why not be honest about what the document actually contained? I simplified it for him given his condition, Ryan countered. The essence was accurate paperwork to keep the business running during his recovery. Frederick cleared his throat. There's also the matter of the financial irregularities identified by our preliminary audit. On cue, the forensic accountants presented their findings, detailed documentation of every cent Ryan had embezzled over the years, the false vendors he had created, the fraudulent invoices, the offshore transfers. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Ryan's confidence began to visibly waver. These are accounting errors, not embezzlement. I can explain every transaction. Please do, Frederick invited, his tone making it clear he expected no satisfactory explanation. For the next hour, Ryan attempted to justify the questionable transactions, his explanations growing increasingly convoluted and contradictory. The accountants systematically dismantled each excuse, pointing out inconsistencies and impossibilities. Throughout this exchange, our mother sat silently, her face growing paler as the evidence mounted. When Ryan claimed certain transfers were loans that our father had approved, she finally spoke up. William never mentioned approving loans of this magnitude, she said quietly. He would have told me. Ryan looked at her in shock. Mom, you can't seriously be turning against me too. I'm not against you, she said, her voice trembling. I'm for the truth, and I don't recognize the person described in these documents. Seeing his mother's support wavering, Ryan shifted tactics. This is all a setup orchestrated by Megan. She's been jealous of my relationship with Dad for years. She'll destroy this family to get what she wants. What I want, I said evenly, is for the truth to come out. For Mom and Dad to see who you really are, not who they've convinced themselves you are. The truth, Ryan laughed bitterly. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I took money from the company. Money I deserved for staying loyal while you ran off to build your precious career. Money I was owed for putting up with Dad's constant criticism and impossible standards. A stunned silence fell over the room. Ryan seemed to realize his mistake, but it was too late to retract his confession. Frederick spoke into the silence. Mr. Mitchell, are you admitting to willfully misappropriating company funds? Ryan's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route. Finding none, he attacked. Everyone in this room is a hypocrite. Dad built this company by cutting corners. The board has overlooked ethical issues for years when it was profitable to do so. And Megan, she's just bitter because our parents recognized which child actually cared about the family legacy. Is that why you forged Dad's signature on documents? I asked quietly. What? Ryan scoffed. I didn't forge anything. I nodded to Stephanie, who presented the final piece of evidence, a comparative analysis of the signature on the hospital document versus authenticated signatures from my father, along with hospital security footage showing Ryan at my father's bedside with the document, but my father appearing unconscious. The document was signed while Dad was sleeping, I explained. The medication knocked him out, so you signed it for him, knowing the board would need his authorization to give you control. Our mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ryan, tell me that's not true. For a moment, I thought Ryan might continue denying everything. Instead, his face contorted with rage. So what if I did? He snarled. Dad would have signed it anyway. He always gives me what I want in the end because he knows I'm the only one who really cares about this family. You don't care about family, our mother said, her voice breaking. You care about control and money. You've manipulated us all. I learned from the best, Ryan shot back. Dad manipulated his way to success. I just followed his playbook. That's not true, a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned to see my father standing there, leaning heavily on a cane, but his eyes clear and focused. I built this company on hard work and integrity. Dad Ryan's tone immediately shifted to concern. You should be resting. Let me handle this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, my father said, moving slowly to the table. I heard everything, Ryan. Your confession, your justifications, your forgery. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, my father interrupted, his voice gaining strength. I understand that I've been blind to who you really are, that I enabled your worst impulses while pushing away the daughter who embodies the values I claim to hold. He turned to the board. I apologize for my failure to see what was happening in my own company, my own family. I take full responsibility for the lapses in oversight that allowed this situation to develop. Frederick nodded gravely. What would you like the board to do, William? My father straightened as much as his weakened condition would allow. I want a full forensic audit. Every transaction Ryan approved or influenced should be examined. Any illegal activity should be documented and appropriate action taken. Ryan paled. Dad, you can't be serious. After everything I've done for this family. What have you done except take my father? Asked sadly. You've stolen from the company, manipulated your mother and me, and tried to deny your sister her rightful place in this family. No more, Ryan. No more. Ryan's desperation was palpable. If you do this, if you let them investigate, everything comes out. The creative accounting during the recession, the regulatory corners we cut on the QX50 model, everything. Are you threatening your father? I asked incredulously. I'm stating facts, Ryan insisted. If I go down for this, I'm taking the company with me. Every skeleton in the Mitchell Electronics closet gets exposed. My father considered this for a long moment, then turned to the board. My son believes he can threaten this company into submission. He's wrong. Mitchell Electronics has weathered challenges before and will do so again. We will conduct a full and transparent investigation, address any past issues that emerge, make restitution where necessary, and emerge stronger for it. He turned to Ryan. You've played your last card, son. It's over. Ryan's face contorted with fury. You'll regret this. All of you. He stormed toward the door, pausing only to jab a finger at me. Especially you, Megan. This isn't over. After he left, the room remained silent for several moments. Finally, Frederick spoke. Given these extraordinary circumstances, I believe we need to formalize some decisions. First, the document purporting to transfer control to Ryan Mitchell is invalid and potentially fraudulent. Second, a full forensic audit will commence immediately. Third, Ryan Mitchell's access to all company accounts, properties, and information systems should be terminated effective immediately. The board voted unanimously to approve these measures. My father then surprised everyone with his next proposal. I'd like to nominate Megan Mitchell for the position of Chief Operations Officer effective immediately. Her background in strategic marketing and her demonstrated commitment to ethical business practices make her ideally suited to help guide the company through this challenging period. I stared at him in shock. Dad, you don't have to accept right away, he said, a hint of his old authority returning. Think about it. The offer stands regardless of what you decide about the inheritance issue. That's a separate matter we'll address as a family. The meeting concluded shortly after, with the board scheduling a follow-up session to review the initial findings of the audit. As people filed out, my mother approached me hesitantly. I owe you an apology, Megan, she said, her eyes filled with tears. I couldn't see what was happening because I didn't want to see it. I failed you as a mother. You believed what you wanted to believe, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology yet. We all do sometimes. Your father and I have a lot to make up for, she acknowledged. If you'll give us the chance. I nodded non-committally, still processing everything that had happened. Let's take it one day at a time. As we prepared to leave, my father's assistant rushed in, her expression alarmed. "Mr. Mitchell's security just called." Ryan was seen entering the executive floor and removing files from his office before they could implement the access restrictions. My father's face hardened. "What files?" "They're checking now, but the server logs show he downloaded the complete client database and financial records from the past 5 years. Stephanie immediately stood. "I'll call a judge for an emergency injunction to prevent use or dissemination of proprietary information." "I'll inform the board," Frederick added grimly. As the room erupted into urgent activity, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Ryan just called. He's coming to the apartment to collect what's his. He sounds dangerous. I'm leaving now." I showed the message to Stephanie, who immediately added Jessica's safety to her list of urgent concerns. "She should go somewhere he won't think to look," she advised. "Not to your place, that would be too obvious." I nodded, directing Jessica to a hotel across town where I'd meet her later. As I helped my parents to their car, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan's threat, "this isn't over," was more than just angry words. He had never handled defeat well, and now, with everything he valued slipping away, he was more dangerous than ever. The final confrontation had exposed the truth, but the fallout was just beginning. What none of us realized yet was how far Ryan would go in his desperation, and how that desperation would ultimately be his undoing. The weeks following the board meeting were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional conversations, and tentative steps toward family reconciliation. Ryan had disappeared after his dramatic exit, though his presence loomed over every discussion like a storm cloud on the horizon. Jessica had filed for divorce and was cooperating fully with the company's forensic accountants, providing access to financial records and communications that further documented Ryan's embezzlement. The evidence was so overwhelming that the board, in consultation with legal counsel, had no choice but to report the matter to the authorities. "The district attorney is reviewing the case," Stephanie informed me over coffee one morning. "With the documentation we've provided, criminal charges are likely." I felt a complex mix of emotions at this news. Despite everything, Ryan was still my brother. What kind of penalties could he face? Given the amount involved and the evidence of premeditation, he's looking at significant jail time unless he accepts a plea deal. The DA might offer reduced charges in exchange for full restitution, which he can't make unless he returns the money he's hidden offshore, I noted. Stephanie nodded. "Precisely. His best option would be to cooperate, but based on his behavior so far, we both knew Ryan was unlikely to surrender quietly. His pride and sense of entitlement ran too deep. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents was evolving. My father, still recovering from his heart attack, had asked me to visit him at home for a private conversation. I found him in his study, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him, surrounded by family photos and company mementos. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his. "There are things I need to say to you that shouldn't wait." I sat, bracing myself for whatever might come. "I've been reflecting on how we got here," he began. "Not just Ryan's crimes, but the family dynamics that enabled them." He picked up a framed photo from his desk, me at my Harvard graduation. "I told myself I was preparing you for the real world by making you earn everything on your own. That I was doing you a favor by not making things too easy." He set the photo down carefully. "What I never admitted was that I held you to a different standard than Ryan. I expected perfection from you while making endless excuses for him. That wasn't fair and it wasn't right." "No," I agreed quietly. "It wasn't. When you chose a career outside Mitchell Electronics, I took it as a rejection. I told myself you didn't care about the family legacy. The truth is, I never made space for you in that legacy. I never showed you that your contribution would be valued." His candor surprised me. My father had never been one for emotional conversations or admissions of fault. "The company's COO position is still open," he continued. "It's yours if you want it, but I'll understand if you don't. Either way, your mother and I have revised our will. Mitchell Electronics will be divided equally between you and any remaining assets after Ryan makes restitution for what he's stolen. This isn't about the inheritance, I said, though the acknowledgement of equality meant more than I wanted to admit. It's about being seen and valued as your daughter. I know, he said softly, and I've failed at that for far too long. I can't change the past, Megan, but I can try to do better now if you'll let me. It wasn't a perfect apology, but from my proud, stubborn father it was monumental. We talked for another hour about the company, about my career accomplishments that he'd never properly acknowledged, about the possibility of me joining Mitchell Electronics in a role that utilized my marketing expertise rather than trying to mold me into a carbon copy of himself. Similar conversations with my mother followed. Her awakening to Ryan's manipulation had been painful but transformative. She suggested family therapy, which I reluctantly agreed to attend. Our first session was awkward and tense, with decades of favoritism and resentment bubbling beneath polite exchanges. I always felt I had to be perfect to earn your attention, I admitted during one particularly raw session. And even then it was never enough compared to Ryan. We thought you didn't need us, my mother said, tears streaming down her face. You were so capable, so independent. Ryan seemed to need us more, so we gave him more. I needed you too, I said, my voice breaking. I just learned not to show it because it never made a difference. These painful truths, long unspoken, finally emerged in the safety of the therapist's office. Healing wasn't immediate or easy, but it was happening, one difficult conversation at a time. Meanwhile, the legal machinery ground forward. The district attorney filed charges against Ryan for embezzlement, fraud, and forgery. An arrest warrant was issued, but he remained missing. Financial investigators froze his known accounts, but significant sums had been moved to untraceable locations before the authorities could act. 6 weeks after the board meeting, Jessica called me in a panic. Ryan came to my apartment, she said, her voice shaking. He was ranting about revenge, saying everyone would pay for betraying him. He took some files and his passport, then left. I think he's planning to flee the country. I immediately notified Stephanie, who alerted the authorities. Hours later, we received word that Ryan had been apprehended at Boston Logan International Airport, attempting to board a flight to the Cayman Islands, where not coincidentally he had established several shell companies over the years. The news of my brother's arrest made the local business pages, but my parents' connections helped keep the most damaging details out of the headlines. Ryan, facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy trial, eventually accepted a plea deal: 5 years in prison, full restitution, and a permanent ban from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. On the day of his sentencing, I attended court with my parents. Ryan refused to look at us, staring straight ahead as the judge detailed his crimes and the agreed-upon penalties. Only at the very end, as he was being led away, did he glance in our direction. His eyes, once so confident and manipulative, now held only defeated rage and the faintest flicker of something that might have been regret. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about the family drama behind the financial crimes. My father, still physically weakened but morally strengthened by recent events, faced them squarely. Mitchell Electronics has always stood for integrity and innovation, he stated. We failed to uphold those values within our own family, and we're working to make that right. The company will continue serving our customers and community while implementing stronger oversight measures to ensure nothing like this happens again. In the months that followed, we rebuilt both the company and our family relationships. I accepted a position as marketing director at Mitchell Electronics, reporting to the COO rather than directly to my father. The arrangement gave me autonomy, while allowing me to contribute to the family business on my own terms. Family therapy continued, sometimes productive, sometimes painful, but always honest. My father struggled with guilt over his role in enabling Ryan's behavior, while my mother worked to build a relationship with me based on who I actually was, rather than the self-sufficient daughter she'd imagined. We established new traditions, monthly dinners where business talk was banned, weekend outings to places that held no complicated family history. Small steps toward a healthier dynamic. Jessica finalized her divorce and moved to Chicago to start fresh. We kept in touch, our unlikely alliance having evolved into a genuine friendship forged in the crucible of family crisis. 6 months after Ryan's sentencing, my parents hosted a small dinner at their home. As we finished dessert, my father raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his eyes meeting mine with genuine warmth. "And to the daughter who had the courage to stand up for the truth even when it was painful to hear." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "We're so proud of the woman you've become, Megan. Not because of your achievements, impressive as they are, but because of your integrity and strength of character." The words I'd longed to hear for decades finally came, not because I'd achieved some impossible standard of perfection, but because they'd finally seen me, truly seen me, for who I was. That night driving home, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us to this point. The old wounds weren't fully healed, and our family would never be perfect. Ryan's absence remained a complicated grief none of us had fully processed. But for the first time I felt hopeful about our future, not as the idealized family I'd once yearned for, but as flawed, authentic people committed to doing better. The accidental text that had started it all, "It's over between us," had indeed marked an ending. The end of secrets, of manipulation, of willing blindness to painful truths. But it had also marked a beginning of honesty, of accountability, and of a family slowly learning to love each other as we really were, not as we wished each other to be. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against your own family? What gave you the strength to do it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this account of my journey to find justice and healing resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more real stories of family transformation. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own homes, but they're often the most important ones to win. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage on your own path to authentic family relationships.